Crafty B coming at ya. I built my first home foundry probably 10 years ago with scraps and bits and pieces, and it cost hardly anything. I'm going to show you today the 6 areas that you will have to go over and build with simple hand tools to do sand casting in your garage or in your shop or in your backyard. So let's get started. I'm going to be moving quick. And the 6 areas of building your home foundry. First of all, you're going to need a propane tank 20 pounder. That is going to be the furnace. Then we're moving on to the burner, which is just some black pipe and a few fittings. Over to the crucible and crucible handling. Either you purchase your graphite or you can make one. The flask is over in the corner made out of pine. And then we're going to move to the 2 different types of sand that you can use. To get started, you need a 20-pound discarded propane tank, and you got to cut the lid off of it. Now, I'm not going to go into all of how you cut the lid off and everything. I did that in another video, and I can link that, how to build your furnace. But let's just imagine this is full. You got to knock the valve off, and that you just crank it off. And then you're going to need a cut. This is about the only tool, or a corded one, that you're going to need to cut the top off. And I typically just take a piece of tape that's still on there, and I cut the top off. And then I use a 2-gallon bucket. This is from Menards. That's a box store here in Michigan. And I grease it up good. And I'm going to set that down inside and then fill this full of plain old Portland cement. Now you're going to say, that won't work. Well, it does work, because I've made many of these furnaces and they have lasted a really long time. I mean, you can use refractory cement, but you're going to drive the price up. I've done this and it works. Next of all, you're going to have to put a hole in it for your burner to slide in and out of, and that's just another piece of scrap type tubing. This is heavy wall, but anything you have, as long as the burner slides inside this tube, you can use it. And I have the luxury of welding that in, but you wouldn't have to do that, because you could drive that in, you could tape that really good, and then the cement is going to hold that. As far as the lid, you're going to need a hole in it to drop your aluminum in. And I just used, that was the size of the rim, and I just cut it, and then 2 bolts. You're going to flip that over. I put these other bolts in here to hold that cement. You're going to need to put something through here, and luckily, like a 1-quart paint can just slides right in there. So when you flip this over to fill it up full of cement, drop that paint can and fill it full of cement. Now I'm going to fast forward to one that is done. Now I've had this one for probably 10 years. I've probably built 3 or 4 of them since. And this is what it's going to look like after some run time. It will pop and snap, but it works. Now, like I said, if you want to complicate it, you can. You can use refractory, and they make the stuffing. I'm not exactly sure what it's called that goes in there, the refractory stuffing. This is the tube right here. This one is welded, and it's heavy. This is the lid. Now I've welded some arms across there so I can stick a rod through. This is where it drops through, and that's the bottom. That is the furnace right there. So once you get your furnace built, your budget furnace out of a 20-gallon propane tank, it's time to come up with a vessel to melt the metal down. Now I used to use metal tubing, drive shaft tubes, whatever. And I made a lot of them, but they do wear out pretty fast. So I finally went to graphite, and I'll cover that in a second. But if you're gonna go with the metal tubing, slap a plate on the bottom, and I would advise putting another piece of sheet metal where the burner's going to hit, so it will slow that process down of burning through. But that will work. No money. It's some scrap and a little bit of time. Now, if you want to go to the graphite, this is a number 4. I think these are around 30 bucks or so. And it's got the same 2 holes as the steel one. And then you can go to a number 6 here. That holds 6 pounds of aluminum. The 4 holds 4. The 6 seems to be the best fit for the propane tank furnace for me. And then the big boy, the number 8, holds 8 pounds. This will fit into the propane furnace. And then the pincher, it's just some 1/4-inch rod that I bent. I just bent it over my knee, I think, and then welded some tabs. And then when you're ready to get your crucible out of the furnace, you just reach in and you grab it and you walk over to your pattern, and I have this little ring with a handle on it, and you pour it like a ladle. It's got a file handle on the end. So, you know, that's pretty much in a nutshell how to melt the metal down to, you know, your crucibles. Those are your choices. So you're going to need a flask or a set of boxes to hold your sand. This is nothing more than 1x3 box store pine. This is an 8-footer. I cut them into 10-inch long pieces. That just used up the whole 8 feet, but if you want a bigger box, you're just going to have to buy a longer piece of wood. It's just drywall screwed together. The most important thing is to keep them flat, so if you can clamp them down, or when you're screwing them together, you don't want any rock in it. It has to be as flat as you can be. It doesn't necessarily have to be that square. It should be, but it doesn't have to be. But these are quite flat, and then I put a couple cleats on it, and I just drywall screwed there. And I came in before I put it together and just drilled some holes with a big drill, just in a little bit to help that sand grab a hold. So now you've got your box all screwed together, and I've got this template here. I put this on here because this is a pattern board that I use a lot of, this size, because I have a lot of these flasks. So this is kind of my master. Actually, it's not. I'm going to show you what it is. It's a Speed Queen pattern, but I'm just going to flip it over. To get this hole location, I clamp it down, or you could screw it down and drill. So now you've got your 2 holes here, your other flask. The cleats are up a little bit higher, and that is just so you can get your hand, get that in there. So you have a hand space. If this was down flat, it would be difficult to separate these two. So imagine that carriage bolt is not in there. You would just take your previously drilled flask. These bolts are not here. They're just 5/16 by 3-inch long carriage bolts. You would take this flask, and I would just set it on top. And I'd flip it over, and I'd just lean on it, and then I would just come down and drill, and that would transfer your other holes. Is it super precise? Heck no, it's not, but it will get the job done. So now you have your flasks right there. Pretty simple. Yeah, that's about it, really. Time to put some heat into your furnace. I went to the hardware, and this is around a 1-inch outside diameter piece of black pipe. You're going to need to drill and tap a hole here for a jam screw, and I use a number 20, quarter 28, and that quarter 28 tap, and a number 3 drill. We're going to use it twice on this project, so that's going to be the jam screw to hold the actual burner, and then you're going to have to come in and drill some holes right in here. And this is a Venturi style burner, so it needs that airflow. These are around a 1/2 inch, and there's just a bunch of them. The layout isn't that critical. They just need to be there. I just hand drilled them, and then I screw a nipple on the end because, as you can see, it gets so hot it will melt. Now we're going to move on to the tip. It's basically, I use an adjustable regulator from the hardware, and then I walk over to the brass fittings section. I screw on a 90-degree brass fitting to the turkey regulator with a cap. This is what's going to hold the 30 thousandths MIG tip, welder tip. If you don't have one of those, you're going to need to drill a 30 thousandths hole in the cap. That will be the orifice. So that is the other quarter 28 tap if you decide to go that route. It will work either way. I have both. Then you just simply put this into there and you tighten it down. That is your burner with your adjustable regulator. Okay, we're almost done. It's time to talk about sand. Most guys use Petrobond. You can buy it off the internet. You can make it, but I wouldn't recommend making it to get started. Just buy 20 or 30 pounds, and that will get you started. Now, Petrobond comes in kind of a reddish color a lot of times, but over time, it will turn black. And you have to mix your sand often, and you're gonna have to add oil to it as you use it. As you use your sand, around that hot part creates a really dry crust. That has to get mixed back into your sand repeatedly, and what that crust does is dries out your sand, so you're gonna have to add some oil. 2-stroke engine oil, and if you don't have a Muller, which I will cover that, But you use a 5-gallon pail and like a drywall mixing paddle on your drill, or just get in there and stir it. But you have to mix the sand up and get that oil distributed through that sand, so when you grab it, this is old sand, but it still can pack a little bit. I haven't used this in a long time, but it has to pack. So Petrobond would be the way I would go if I was just first starting out. I have just recently switched to green sand because green sand, there's hardly any smoke, there's no odor, and I can pour inside. So this is green sand, and obviously it doesn't have any packability right now because there's no water in it. It dries out. I have to add water every time. I have to mix it a lot more than the Petrobond, but it's really a nice way to go. And you just add water. So those are your two choices for sand. Like I said, if I was just getting going, I'd probably buy 30 pounds of Petrobond, and that's enough to fill the flask that we just talked about, and then, you're on your way. Well, last of all, if you get through all these steps and you've got your burner and your furnace and everything going, I would recommend to just melt down some scrap. Find some scrap bits and pieces of aluminum. It's all over the place. You can find different things. I mean, I've been melting scrap down for years, and go through all the stages and then just pour it in a cupcake tin. That will get your feet wet on, the whole casting project. So in a summary, on the cheap Foundry, these are just loose prices. The furnace, you may have $20 in it. You're going to get the tank for free. 60 pounds of ready-mix cement is about $4. So I went a little high, $20 and a little bit of scrap metal. The burner is going to be the most expensive because it's all new. The adjustable regulators, I think, are around 28. Some black pipe and some brass fittings. I put 45. The flasks, about $10. A 1x3 pint, 8 feet long, and a couple bolts. That might be a little low, might be a little high. The Crucible can be anywhere from $0 to $50. If you're going to make one from scrap, you're going to be at the 0. They make them even smaller than 4, but number 6 and a number 8, you're in the $30 to $40 range. The sand is, you just should buy the sand, the Petrobond or the green sand, around $30 for 30 pounds. So there it is. You're right around $100 for everything on this table. And you can do this in not too amount of time. There it is, the super cheap Foundry. I know I just kind of scratched the surface, but I built this setup many, many years ago, and I am still using all of it. I use the propane tank furnace from time to time when I'm doing smaller jobs because it works really well. It has held up for 6 or 7 years, the one that I just showed you, so I can prove. I'm confident that it's going to work for you. Upcoming videos will be pattern making, split patterns, casting apart from an original, loose casting. I'm going to be covering all that here in my own little foundry. I'll be doing machining, lathe, Bridgeport work, all types of stuff that goes along with casting. So thanks for watching, everybody.